Welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Education, SOA, Master's Degree Programs, Master of Arts, Distance Education, MADE, First Year. MDE 411 Growth and Philosophy of Distance Education. Block 5 Growth and Innovations. Unit 2 Characteristics of Distance Education.
Rumble, 1986. Editor's note: this extract from another major book of the 80s leads us to look in some depth at theories of distance education. Rumble begins by offering us some comments on the work of Michael Moore and his discussion of the concept of distance. He then summarizes and explains Desmond Keegan's attempts to define distance education. In doing that, he introduces the ideas of Peters. Rumble thus provides us with a survey of some of the most important works on distance education. He goes on to put forward 3 models for describing distance education: systems approach, holistic and transactional. All 3 deserve careful examination. A model should provide a framework for reflection and action. You may like to consider which model is most appropriate to the distance education that you know best. In particular, are any of the models suitable for describing small-scale distance teaching enterprises? Definitions of distance education. There are a number of problems in attempting to define distance education. Firstly, used in this sense, the term distance has different connotations. It is certainly not restricted to the notion of mere geographical distance from the source of teaching. A high proportion of students enrolled in distance education courses live in densely populated urban areas close to the physical location of the institution from which their course materials are mailed. Although, initially, distance methods may have arisen in some countries, e.g. Australia, France during World War II, because of students' difficulties in traveling to conventional institutions, it would be fair to say now that distance in the physical sense is not a major necessary defining feature of this form of education provision. Perhaps the most fruitful use of the term distance is that proposed by Moore, 1983, 157, in the expression transactional distance, which defines the nature and degree of separation of teacher and learner in the educational process. Transactional distance is a function of 2 variables called dialogue and structure. Dialogue describes the extent to which, in any educational program, learner and educator are able to respond to each other. This is determined by the content or subject matter which is studied, by the educational philosophy of the educator, by the personalities of educator and learner, and by the environmental factors, the most important of which is the medium of communication. For example, an educational program in which communication between educator and the independent learner is by radio or television permits no dialogue. A program by correspondence is more dialogic, yet not to the same extent as some in which correspondence or radio or television is supplemented by telephone communication. Structure is a measure of an educational program's responsiveness to learners' individual needs. It expresses the extent to which educational objectives, teaching strategies, and evaluation methods are prepared for, or can be adapted to, the objectives, strategies, and evaluation methods of the learner. In a highly structured educational program, the objectives and the methods to be used are determined for the learner, and are inflexible. In a linear, non-branching programmed text, for example, there is less opportunity for variation, according to the needs of a particular individual, than there is in those correspondence courses which permit a wide range of alternative responses by the tutor to individual students' questions and assignment submissions. In a program in which there is little structure, and dialogue is easy, interaction between teacher and learner permits very personal and individual learning and teaching. Using these dimensions, the most distant program would be one in which there was neither dialogue nor structure. An example would be a wholly self-directed program of individual reading. At the other end of the continuum, the least distant program would be one in which there is a high level of dialogue, with little predetermined structure, for example, an individually tailored tutorial program. Most of what are commonly called distance education programs fall somewhere between these 2 extremes. They have a measure of dialogue, as well as being more or less highly structured. This conceptualization also helps explain how a student learning in a face-to-face environment whose sole educational activity is to go to lectures to take notes can be at a greater transactional distance than a student on a distance education course who regularly meets, corresponds with, or telephones his tutor. A second factor to consider in attempting any definition of distance education lies in the great diversity of practices, systems, and projects that are commonly covered by the term. Granted, they all have in common, as the defining element, and in opposition to traditional classroom-based practice, the separation in space and in time of teaching and learning activities. With teaching generally based on a combination of structured learning materials and the use of intermediaries, tutors, counselors, animators, to assist learners in their use of these materials. But here the resemblance often ends. Differences are attributable to a number of factors. Firstly, there has been a fairly rapid evolution of methods and structures, especially in the last few decades, which has contributed to considerable diversity in the field of distance education. This is all the more remarkable when contrasted with the conservatism and stability of conventional education. Classrooms and lecture theatres, and what goes on inside them, look much the same anywhere in the world, and have done so for a remarkably long time. The similarities in the situations of members of a rural radio listening circle in West Africa, students enrolled in one of the many Indian University Correspondence Directorates, British Open University students working at home on multimedia courses, and online college students in New York State, are not so easy to spot. The many forms of distance education as we now know them have evolved from a wide variety of different sources. In some countries, a strong tradition of commercial correspondence colleges has survived for 100 years or more. Postal tuition, combined with weekly or monthly lessons of printed or cyclo-styled course materials, is still a basic model which has often been adopted relatively unchanged by many publicly financed institutions. In other countries, most notably in Latin America, radio broadcasting organizations were among the pioneers of distance education, and this is reflected in the structure of many current systems where there is less emphasis on print and individual correspondence tuition, and more on locally organized listening groups with trained animators. The last decade has seen the creation of a number of distance teaching universities throughout the world, many inspired by the success of the British Open University. Many of them use print and broadcast media combined with face-to-face and postal tuition in an integrated manner. These institutions have contributed a great deal to creating a much more positive image for distance education, giving credibility, through the levels of achievement of their graduates, to methods which were previously often considered as second best, if not third rate. For many years, at least in some countries, for example, Australia and the United States, institutions teaching conventional students have also accepted a role in the education of external students. Recently, as the competition for students has increased, more and more traditional institutions have developed new and often very flexible distance study programs. In the last year or two, in the wealthier countries, the new communications possibilities opened by data transmission networks and widespread home ownership of micro and personal computers are beginning to be exploited for educational purposes. It is too early to know yet what the longer-term impact of projects such as the California-based Electronic University will be, but there is no doubt that networking and electronic mail technologies have considerable potential for improving the quality and nature of tutorial and student contacts in distance education. Thus, the problem in trying to establish a definition of distance education lies in identifying the common features of enterprises as different from each other as correspondence colleges based on tutorial tuition, radiophonic schools, and university programs using electronic mail to reach off-campus students. Perhaps the most comprehensive general definition of distance education is that first proposed by Keegan in 1980 and subsequently modified in 1986. Keegan's definition is based inter alia on an analysis of the definitions proposed by Holmberg, 1977, Peters, 1973, and Moore, 1973. Keegan, 1986, 49-50, identifies 7 principal characteristics which he regards as being essential for any comprehensive definition. The separation of teacher and student. The influence of an educational organization, the use of technical media. The provision of two-way communication. The absence of group learning, with students taught largely as individuals, while retaining the possibility of occasional seminars, participation in the most industrialized form of education. The privatization of learning, in that learning occurs away from the group. Separation of teacher and student. The separation in space and time of teaching and learning is a basic feature of distance education. It is worth stressing that this separation is not the exclusive prerogative of distance education systems. Some proportion of learning activities in conventional systems takes place apart from the presence of a teacher, increasingly so as one passes up the scale from school to university education, while many distance education systems include elements of face-to-face contact with teachers. What is particular to distance education practice in this respect is that the overall design of a system is premised on this separation, and that therefore the role of the teacher, and the nature of the transactions between teacher and learner, are completely changed. The role of the institution. Distance education needs to be differentiated not only from conventional classroom-based education but also from private study at home. People learn a great deal through their own efforts. What distinguishes distance teaching is that there is an institution that is consciously teaching its students. Use of technical media. The use of technical communications media in an integrated manner to provide the basic teaching elements is the factor which has perhaps most marked the recent growth of distance education. If the mass media can be used successfully as a principal vehicle for teaching, and as a substitute for a classroom teacher, then considerable economics of scale are theoretically possible. In addition, people who are unable to benefit from traditional education because of physical, economic, or social barriers to access, can be reached. Much of the rhetoric surrounding the use of the term open in the distance education context stems from this notion of the relative accessibility to the public at large of print and broadcast media, compared with the relative difficulty of obtaining access to resources for face-to-face teaching. However, it is clear that mere physical access to print and broadcast media does not necessarily imply that they can be used effectively for educational purposes. Potential learners need to be capable of studying independently and to know how best to use these media for learning. This can be problematic, especially for media which have become almost exclusively associated with the provision of entertainment or information two-way communication between individual students and mentors. The technical means of communication most commonly used in distance education, with the exception of correspondence by post, which can be very slow, telephone, instantaneous, but also asynchronous in the case of answer phones, two-way radio, instantaneous, and electronic mail, both synchronous and asynchronous, are all one-way. One-way communication is a characteristic of educational technology, with which distance education is often confused. Keegan, 1986, 44. The dominance of one-way communication in distance education explains why so many distance education systems are felt to be information processing, or systematic, models which basically treat learning as the processing, storage and retrieval of information, and in which the learner is a passive recipient of educational messages devised by those who produce the materials. Keegan argues that it is important that the student in a distance education system can profit from dialogue with the institution that provides the learning materials, and that the student should be able to initiate this dialogue. 1986, 44. Two-way communication between the individual student and his or her mentor, e.g. tutor or counselor, is thus regarded as an essential component of a distance education system. Students may communicate with their tutors or counselors in writing, by telephone and two-way radio, or in individual face-to-face meetings. In some instances, these contacts may be public, for example television or radio phone-in programs which enable students to speak with the teachers responsible for the design of a course, as opposed to local tutors who may not have been associated with its development. Generally, however, they are more private, involving discussions of assignment work that the student is submitting for evaluation or personal difficulties encountered in studying at a distance. Group learning. Learning in groups is a feature of many distance education systems. In his 1980 definition, Keegan argued that the possibility of occasional seminars was a defining characteristic of distance education. At the very minimum, this would imply the organization of regular face-to-face meetings of students in a particular area, with or without the presence of a tutor, counselor, or animators, or occasional longer seminars or workshops, such as the contact programs run by many of the Indian universities' correspondence directorates, or the British Open University's residential summer schools. Subsequently, Keegan modified his view. He argues that the presence of a learning group is fundamental to most conventional education, whereas distance education does not compel students to join a group. Most distance education systems treat the student basically as an individual. Keegan, 1986, 45. He holds, Ibid, 45, that the separation of the learner from the learning group throughout the length of the learning process is a characteristic feature of this form of education which distinguishes it from conventional oral, group-based education, although he accepts that many distance education systems do make use of group-based learning. This leads him to his summary conclusion that distance education is characterized by the quasi-permanent absence of the learning group throughout the length of the learning process, so that people are usually taught as individuals and not in groups, with the possibility of occasional meetings for both didactic and socialization purposes. Ibid, 49. However, new communications technologies are now being used to permit group interactions at a distance, either synchronously via audio and telephone conferencing, or asynchronously through computer conferencing, textual teleconferencing using terminals in students' and tutors' homes linked through the telephone networks to a host computer. An industrialized form of education. We owe to Peters, 1973, the introduction into the definition of distance education of a strong emphasis on the quasi-industrial nature of distance education systems. Peters is right to point out that the mass production and distribution of learning materials, as well as the logistical aspects of administering and coordinating the activities of dispersed populations of students and tutors, involves the application of principles drawn from the industrial sector. The division of labor that revolves around specialized tasks and technologies associated with the development and production of learning materials is a marked feature of some forms of distance education. The skills of production, operations management are needed to ensure that materials are developed and produced and services delivered on time to students. Explanations of these processes tend to be couched in the language of classical management, based on the ideas of Max Weber, Henry Fayol and Frederick Taylor, which emphasize organizational structures embodying rational, working arrangements designed to operate in predictable fashions. The introduction of such principles into an educational institution can be problematic. It is not always easy to match the relatively creative activities of course development to a rigidly scheduled production system. While many educators, used to a high degree of personal autonomy in their day-to-day work, resent the loss of autonomy that is implicit in such regularized and task-differentiated systems. For some, the environment proves stressful. This raises problems of interpersonal behavior both within the productive group and between groups that require a more human relations approach to management if understanding is to be achieved. Also, the packaging of knowledge which the quasi-industrial nature of many aspects of distance education practice implies also raises problems for many educators. Most notably for those who believe that the educational process should focus on the personal needs of the student, and that this is something distinct from the training approach implicit in packaging. Certainly there are those, Willan, 1981, 244-5 and Bath 1981, 213, who challenge the belief that industrialization is an essential feature of distance education, the latter arguing that some small systems are not industrialized even if larger ones are. Keegan himself argues that there are industrialized features even in small-scale distance education systems. Keegan, 1986, 47. However, he no longer insists that this is an essential defining feature of distance education. Ibbard, 48. Privatization. Keegan's last defining characteristic, which is really connected with the fifth, is the essential privatization of the learning process, which he identifies as being present in distance education, by which he means that a distance system takes the student from the learning group and places him, her in a more private situation. Keegan. J. 986, 49. Distance education, he says, is characterized by the privatization of institutional learning. Ibbard, 49. Models of distance education. A number of attempts have been made to integrate the defining characteristics of distance education, such as those presented by Keegan and discussed above, into models or theories of distance education. The rest of this chapter introduces three of these: the first a systems model of distance education, the second a holistic model of distance education, and the third a transactional model of distance education. A systems model of distance education. The systems model is the one proposed by K. N. Rumble, 1981, 19-22, based on the concepts developed by Miller and Rice, 1967, for analyzing organizations as open systems which exist by exchanging materials with their environment. The activities carried out by an organization are divided by Miller and Rice into three categories. Operating activities, the specific import, conversion, and export processes which define the particular nature and role of the enterprise. Logistical activities, which ensure the supply of necessary resources for the proper functioning of the enterprise, recruitment, training, purchasing, etc. Regulatory activities, which ensure the overall coordination and control of all processes within the enterprise, as well as its links with the outside environment. The operating activities which are characteristic of distance education enterprises can be grouped into two major subsystems, see Figure 4.1, which reflect the separation of teacher and student, or teaching and learning activities, to which reference has already been made. The materials subsystem covers the design, production, and distribution of mediated learning materials. Materials development embraces the activities of curriculum planners, teachers, contents experts, instructional designers, media producers and other transformers, e.g. editors, graphic designers, who help in the production of media products. The outputs from their activities are prototype materials which, through the materials production process, are turned into finished products. In single or multiple copies, in print, audiovisual, and/or computer software form. These materials can then be packaged together as a course and are then distributed to all the students and tutors involved in the course through mailing, broadcasting or data transmission facilities. Regulatory activities. Materials subsystem. Materials development. Materials production. Materials distribution. Student subsystem. Admission, course allocation, assessment, allocation to services etc. Study, certification, logistical activities. The student subsystem is separate in system terms from the materials subsystem, involving different activities, personnel and resources, all of which are basically concerned with facilitating the students' learning activities and managing their progress through the institution. It admits students to the institution, allocates them to courses, local centers and tutors and counselors, collects fees, ensures that they receive course materials, assesses their progress, issues certificates, and maintains their records. The point of contact between the two subsystems occurs when the student receives the learning materials and starts to use them. The value of this simple systems model is that it clearly identifies the principal activities involved in running a distance education enterprise, as well as the interrelationships that exist between them. It underlines the importance of the quasi-industrial process that characterizes the production and distribution of materials, and lays stress on the specialization of tasks and division of labor. It defines the difference between an educational publishing organization, which would only require a materials subsystem, and a distance education institution, which must also provide an appropriate student subsystem. It also helps pinpoint the activities which are independent of student numbers, e.g. course development, and which are therefore susceptible to economies of scale, and is hence a useful starting point for financial modeling. Finally, it underlines the fact that, theoretically and in practice, different groups and organizations can collaborate in providing a distance education system, each perhaps taking on responsibility for different activities, or clusters of activities, within each subsystem. A holistic model of distance education. In contrast to the rather technocratic model presented above, which is adequate in its way for helping to understand the activities which define a distance education system, a more global theoretical structure has been developed by Perto, 1981-224, which effectively displays the argument in favor of distance education. It is summarized below, and in Figure 4.2 is a linked sequence of 14 elements, most of which have already been mentioned in this chapter. The summary is of great value in that it takes these various elements and brings them together in a logical manner, thus providing a useful synthesis of cost, access and educational arguments favoring distance education. The summary below is to be read in conjunction with Figure 4.2. Educational media are similar in their effectiveness, but differ in the ways they can readily be distributed, Box A. This makes it possible to move away from the fixed staffing ratios necessary to face-to-face study, Box B, thereby changing the role of the teacher, Box C, and making possible a reduction in costs, Box D. It is then possible to reach audiences different from the traditional ones, through distance teaching, and to do so at a reasonable cost, Box A. The equivalence of the media, however, presents us with problems of choice, Box F, best resolved by a multimedia approach, Boxes G and H, which allows for feedback, Box I, and encourages active learning, Box J. In working out the approach to be used, the organization of any face-to-face element is of key importance, Box K, and leads us to consider how to use distance teaching to ensure dialogue, Box N, something which is facilitated if a concern with new audience and a new relation between education and the community, Box L, lead to the use of groups as a basis for adult learning, Box M. Perriton's argument starts with the hypothesis that different media are similar in their effectiveness for teaching. This is based on the results of comparative studies of the use of print, radio, film, television, and live teachers, as reported, for example, by Schramm, 1977. Many such comparative studies have been carried out. The general conclusions from them are that it is factors such as the pedagogical quality and clarity of presentation, the relevance of the content, and the motivation and interest of the learners, which are the significant variables, rather than the particular medium of instruction. The next elements in the argument presented in Figure 4.2 follow on logically from this initial premise. The face-to-face teacher's or tutor's role becomes that of a facilitator of learning rather than a transmitter of information, and the group becomes a key forum for debate, discussion, and feedback. In fact, Perto concludes by suggesting that in taking decisions over choice of media, the specific functions to be allocated to group activity should be considered first, within the overall cost constraints applying in particular cases. Use of the various media can then be decided subsequently, in light of the extent and nature of face-to-face and group contact. This conclusion stems from the community, or society-centered orientation of Perriton's work, which contrasts with the institution-centered approach, found in many distance education systems. Fig. 4.2, a holistic model of distance education. Look at the screen. Although much of Perriton's work is concerned with the use of distance methods for expanding education as economically as possible in developing countries, notably in Africa, and often for teacher training and for rural and community work, his conclusions are just as important for the provision of education for adults in the more developed countries. In fact, there are many lessons to be learned from the wealth of experience gained in this field by a number of African and Latin American countries, particularly in the combined use of local community groups, radio broadcasting, and print materials. See, for example, Perto, 1980, on the use of distance methods for community education. The importance of Perriton's holistic model is that it provides a convincing argument for the adoption of distance education as part of a general national educational policy. A transactional model of distance education. A rather different perspective is obtained by viewing distance education from the sometimes competing perspectives of the principal, actors, involved in the process, and the relationships on transactions between them, see Figure 4.3. In traditional education, the vast majority of the learners' transactions are with individual teachers who, in addition to actual teaching and assessing, may give personal advice on course choice, help with administrative problems, and generally monitor the learner's progress. These transactions, whether with teachers or with others, usually take place within the physical boundaries of the institution. In distance education, however, the situation is quite different. Learners have three principal types of transaction to maintain, and each of these has a different site within the system. Transactions, with the learning materials reading, viewing, listening, manipulating, selecting, interpreting, synthesizing, and so on. The locus of these interactions is generally the student's home, but may be a local center. Transactions with intermediaries, such as tutors, counselors and animators, who are there to help in interpreting and using the course materials, and to promote group discussion and interactions with other learners. The locus of these transactions varies. Local study centers or occasional residential sessions for group work, the home or place of work for exchanges by post, telephone, or other communications channels, transactions within the institution, or at least that part of it set up to provide student services and to deal with administrative and general queries and problems. These are of necessity often impersonal, having to be carried out at a distance, and may be perceived by learners as problematic, the unfeeling bureaucracy of the faceless institution. etc. However, the institution may at times deal with students on an individual basis through personal counseling services, and the faceless bureaucracy may be humanized to the extent that such services are available. Henry and K. 1985, 124-5. Fig. 4.3, a transactional model of distance education. Look at the screen. Beyond this circle of transactions, in which the learner participates, is a complex set of invisible, to the student, activities and interactions which are necessary for providing, coordinating and maintaining learning resources, the network of intermediaries, and student services. These activities were outlined above in our presentation of the course and student subsystems, see Figure 4.1. The principal agents responsible for these activities include educators and subject matter experts responsible for selecting, organizing, and developing content and curriculum of a particular course. Transformers, of various kinds, who work with the subject matter experts in developing and producing the specific media products which make up the learning resources. These include editors, graphic designers, media producers, educational technologists, and computer software programmers. Managers responsible for planning, the formulation of policy, organization and staffing, coordination and control, and evaluators concerned with monitoring the functioning of the system, providing and analyzing information for decision-making, and recommending necessary corrective actions. In some cases, these will be specific individuals based in an evaluation or management information unit. In others, evaluation may be done by managers and educators as a normal part of their work. Viewing distance education systems in transactional terms emphasizes the human relations aspects of management, contrast to the systems approach of Kay and Rumble, which tends to stress the rational aspects of management. Thank you.